I just think it would have been a magic place, you know. It would have been like an oasis of water, of life. Ahuriri is a former open water body wetland that existed in the lower Huritini or Horseville River catchment. Probably quite hard for us to fathom how big it was. It was 170 hectares roughly of open water surrounded by raupo, harakeke. E rere atu nei ngā wai o Huritini, mai I te tauawa amaka ki te hapua o Ahuriri, tai noa ki te whenua o te koroha. E rere atu tonu e. Ka hoki mai au ki te pā o Ngāti Koreha, kei raro I te taumata o te moko peke. Ka tiro atu I te Waihora o te keti ika rākai hautu, e rere atu tonu e. Kei he o mātou mahinga kai, I taunaha, kia rātou mā. Kei te tipu o mātou wawata, o a mātou ahunui. Hei whakahaumanu I ngā wai o ngā tūpuna, e rere atu tonu e. It was a place where our people came together, and it was renowned as a significant mahinga kai for Ngāi Tahu at the time. And there would have been all the types of inanga, tuna, the eels of course, the raupo that was on the edge of it that was utilised in the past for a number of things, obviously making mokihi, the reed sort of canoes we used to make. We're just around the corner from the pā of Manuka at Taitapu. Down behind us we head down towards Poranui, Birdlings Flat and Wairewa, Little River. We can shoot through to Whakaotearoa, Littleton Harbour, our whanaunga from Ngāti Whiki, from Ngāti Mako at Wairewa, Ngāi Ahuriri to the north, and Ngāi Turuhiki over to the other side at Taumotu. Obviously this was a place to get food as well, but it was also a place just to be and just to live and to sit. During the land purchases, the biggest one around here is the 1848 Kemp's purchase, they would call it, of Canterbury, where Ngāi Tahu sold Canterbury to the Crown, but we reserved for ourselves our mahinga kai. That was what we believed, that places like this would be ours and we'd be able to keep coming to them, but it didn't quite work out that way. The land was privatised around most of these areas, so the water bodies themselves became landlocked in private land, and when our people tried to go over that land, they obviously got in a bit of trouble. As early as 1849, our tūpuna, in particular Matiaha Te Moruhu, started writing letters to Queen Victoria saying that it's not quite worked out how we thought it was. We thought that we were able to access these places, and now we're not. And then of course later on, after the 1850s, 1860s, our people started writing more letters about the drainage of wetlands and asking government, the local authorities to stop doing that, because that was where all the kai was. That was where they came to connect and to look after themselves. And we became impoverished in our own landscape. In 1868, the first Māori land court sitting in Christchurch was held, and our people came together and they claimed not only this place, but Waikakariki, Horseshoe Lake in Christchurch, Ihutai, Christchurch Estuary. All of those key food gathering places, mahinga kai places, were claimed in that court. Unfortunately, the judge said no, they were already being privatised. It was in the 1890s that Te Koroha Māori Reserve was granted to us because we kept coming here, we didn't give up. Every year we would come for the tuna heke, we'd come to gather eels here, and so eventually with that pressure on the Crown we just kept asking, kept demanding, and eventually we got the Te Koroha Māori Reserve granted to us. Around that time in the 1860s and 1870s, our settlers had arrived. They came here, it was a land of opportunity, and they came out onto the plains here, into the wetlands as well, and wanted to set up the farming systems and the systems that they knew, and that was, you know, it was sheep and it was cattle. To make that happen, the land was drained.
My grandfather came out as a child from Scotland. He was probably lucky to get a ballot for land in those days, so he then became a farmer just very close to where the Motocross race course is. My grandfather became part of the Ellesmere Land Drainage Board, and he spent a lot of time discussing how to drain the Ahuriri Lagoon. There was a lot of pressure from the local farmers to keep it drained by either lowering the lake and straightening the river so the water would get away, so that they would have land that they could farm.
Unfortunately, pretty soon after that, Te Waihora Māori Reserve became a bit hopeless and useless because Ahuriri Lagoon was drained.
Our family arrived with the Gebbies and the Deanses into Canterbury and farmed for the Deanses in Riccarton Bush. And then in 1843, the Gebbies and the Mansons left the Deanses and took over land in Gebbies Valley. And then my father took over here in 1959. We did what we did and we farmed like we did because we could. I've got a drain that runs through our dairy farm at home. We had a consent 30 years ago to put our dairy effluent into that drain, which then goes into Lake Ellesmere.
My grandfather used to bring all of us out here. He used to come out eeling and go over to Waihora and eel over there and fish. It's part of our whakapapa. We're funny Māori, where our whakapapa takes us, that's it, that's ours. And you just belong.
Ngāi Tahu really led the charge on wanting to see a wetland return. It wasn't just that we wanted to plant some trees and make it look pretty, we actually wanted the water body to have some life back in it. And it was Whakaora Te Senior from Ngāi Te Ahuriri that actually lodged the claim for Ahuriri itself. If anyone was going to be able to restore a wetland, it was going to be the Regional Council. If they couldn't do it, then how could we expect a farmer to do it? How could we expect even the iwi to do it?
The Ahuriri project is part and connected to Te Waihora, and Te Waihora connects us to our whakapapa and to our pūrākau, and so that connects us to our identity. In 2014, the Te Waihora Co-Governance Group endorsed a plan that had been created by a wider group. It aligned to the strategic plan of the co-governance.
We had Donald Couch, who was the first Ngāi Tahu Ikan Commissioner there from 2010.
My dad wrote a book about Rapaki, and in it there's a photo of 1923 of he and one of his brothers and one of his sisters and a friend from here, and they've got a dray and they've got all these eels at Ahuriri Lagoon. And of course, shortly after that, the lagoon was drained completely. So many people have been involved in this. We had so much work done that when the government said, well, we need to do something about wetlands, and we've got a pot of money for that, hello, here we are. And my role was to look after the politics. One of the best things that happened, and one of the biggest things, was that the residents came on board, farmers from around there.
My neighbour Colin Arps and I were talking about wetlands and things like that, which we've always been interested in. Colin's neighbour, who's got a hut down at the Greenbelt Huts, Donald Brown, was interested as well. His ancestors used to gather eels and flounder out of this area. We got talking to people in Ecan, and there was a meeting organised at the Whakaora Hall, and it was well attended by a lot of local people.
It could have gone off the rails in any one of a dozen different areas, but when we developed proposals, and there were several plans revised, produced by different people having different focuses and so on, but in effect, I think we did our homework. And so when somebody raised a question about it, we had an answer.
We had a steering group and the committee came out here. We looked at the land as it was. It was a bunch of paddocks on either side of what is now the Horswell or Huritini River, and we decided on the site behind us.
The people came on this committee with probably very little experience on governance.
Donald Couch was the reason I got involved in the Ahuriri Lagoon restoration project. When he turned to being a commissioner for ECAN, he asked me to take over his role.
We talked for quite a while about the history of the site and the importance of it, and a number of values, but we hadn't sort of tackled how we'd physically get a wetland at this site. And I came along to one of those meetings with my thoughts on it. It ranged from putting weirs in the river to raise water levels. That particular meeting, I'm hearing, was a kind of a turning point for the project, where it just kind of was a bit of a catalyst or galvanised people into thinking about the solution rather than talking about constraints and problems and that kind of thing.
I remember sitting around those meetings and working with the runanga and all the partners, and three things really popped out. One was water quality, so we wanted to know whether we could take water off the Huritini in through this wetland and could we improve it. So that became one of the major drivers. The other one was to improve mahinga kai, so the food gathering quality and quantity in this lagoon, and also about improving overall biodiversity.
We never had to have a vote on anything. We always reached consensus, and I don't think there was any meetings where we went away that everybody wasn't talking to each other. We learned to win and lose gracefully.
We put in a bid under the co-governance arrangement, working with the runanga.
It was for $3.5 million. Some of that was coming from MFE and some of it was coming from Environment Canterbury.
In this area there had been a lot of community engagement for a plan for the Ahuriri area. We were able to involve the community.
From there, that led to a process of coming together and working through the design of a reconstructed wetland. The construction process was massive, but it was done over a 4 hectare area. So we've got the main wetland here, but also the original channel of the Huritini, which is quite an important part of the process as well, to reopen that up and to let water back in.
There were a number of challenges, largely due to the position on a large, very, very flat plain. The big concern was groundwater and the ability to continue excavation at depth, and also the weather and not being caught out by rainfall. As expected, there were a couple of big rainfall events that quickly turned it into a wetland before it's quite ready to be a wetland.
When you've got agricultural soils that have been fertilised for many years, there's a risk that when you make those into a wetland that phosphorus will leach out and will actually create a source of phosphorus into the lakes. So we were able to do a laboratory test to look at the risk under the sort of conditions that would be in the wetland. We found that the risk was actually very low, which was good, so we didn't have a problem there.
One of the challenges is that the Huritini, the Haweswell, has one of the lowest gradients of any river in Canterbury. It's very slow flowing.
We made sure that with mana whenua, we organised a site blessing before any construction started in here.
A short time after construction began, we had a major issue. We found that the design water level had to be offset by 300 mils. The project was put on hold until this issue was looked into further. If we hadn't got the design level corrected, then it would have impacted the survival and performance of the wetland planting that went in.
As part of the delivery of the Ahuriri Lagoon project, we installed 80,000 aquatic plant species into the wetland areas of the constructed lagoon, and we installed 52,000 terrestrial plants into the drier areas.
We actually made sure that there was an area where we could put some old logs in. There's even an island further back that was all purposely designed.
We didn't anticipate some of the struggles we've had with the soil type out here. In dry conditions, the soil really packs hard on top and it really just goes rock solid. I really like the idea of establishing a significant seed source of well-propagated plants in the area, because that's a contribution to the catchment.
That was quite a sort of special moment to allow that water to start flowing down the old channel and then start to come into the lagoon. There's been a process running in parallel to the design and the development and the construction process of the wetland to come to the site with the Papatūpu runanga We undertake assessments using a tool called takiwa, which takes down responses to questions on modification, health, mahinga kai.
My colleagues Craig Pauling and Mapahi Martin Paul were involved in this project from its inception and developed the Mātauranga Māori monitoring program for assessing Ahuriri Lagoon. We basically have worked together for the last few years with ecology coming out and assisting on the assessments for the day, being on site with the runanga, setting hinaki and other traps and nets and pulling in the fish species that are present on site, and it helps to complement the Indigenous Mātauranga Māori knowledge. To me personally, I think it's been really good to be involved from the project from its inception and see it reach its endpoint. I've seen quite a dramatic change in the environment for the positive. My people in the mana whenua can come here and collect and practice traditional practices.
Past generations, they didn't have supermarkets, they relied on these type of places, not only the mahinga kai that came out of the water as in the turn of Pātiki and nanga and stuff, but a lot of the plants as well. And that was their doctor's dispensary. There was a lot of mahinga kai species here, but I think we can reintroduce others. There was no mussels in there at this stage, no kikawai out there at all. Seems to be only tuna at this and inanga.
You have to have papatapu runanga at the heart of it. Mana whenua has to be there and have to be involved right from the co-design, co-development, implementation and monitoring.
The reason why I got involved is to try and reconnect to our past, reconnect to this area and to restore what we can to what it used to be. If we can gather kai here, therefore the land is returned back to its mauri, the mauri is returned, and the food can be gathered, and healthy kai because the environment's good, healthy kai for our whānau. People are digging drains, keeping the drains clear so they can drain the land. They're fighting papatūnuku, fighting Mother Earth, just to let it return to what it wants to be, and then we can be nurtured by papatūnuku, and we can nurture her as well.
I think it's a great opportunity to show where traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge can work together and achieve a common goal as well for enhancing the environment and cultural ecological values.
That monitoring will tell us whether the water quality sort of improvement will come.
I haven't been here for a year now. This is fantastic, totally transformed. It's sort of in its winter plumage a bit at the moment with the plants being sort of slightly frosted off, but still plenty of wildlife out there. It's a real nice mix of open water and planted zones. Having come from being a paddock to now being this sort of really beautiful natural wetland area, it just looks so natural just fitting into this landscape here. I was really brought in, I think, probably for my experience and expertise in building wetlands in the past and being involved in that, but also because we're wanting to monitor the performance of this wetland, particularly how it improves water quality. So what we're trying to do is we're measuring the flows that's coming in and the concentration of contaminants that's coming in and also what's coming out. And the difference between those is what is removed. To do that, we've got to put in quite a lot of gear to actually measure that flow, and included in that is probes that can do near continuous measurement of some things, and other things we're going to be using automatic samplers to take samples out of that water that's coming in and going out.
Last time I was here, there's quite a few tuna or eels just swimming along in the channel.
I was just looking at that channel over there and wondering if that's part of the idea of joining things up too.
Oh, the secondary one there, yeah.
Other old channel.
Certainly would be nice to return the whole flow through into the old channel here, which is behind us. But it would require building something across the stream and potentially.
So not necessarily technically difficult to do, but,
no.
But it's more the consenting.
And the other option is a partial groin, which we originally had on plans. So either a partial blockage or a full rerouting of the channel back into its old course.
One of the things we've built into the restoration work here at Ahuriri is involving local schools. There's a local trust, Te Kakariki, that's been involved with their Kids Discovery plant out. So we've brought them on board to ensure that we get engagement with local school children and of course their families and the community, the wider community. Not only do they plant some trees at the end of the day and help restore the wetland, but they're also learning about the history, the mātauranga of this area. They learn about the biodiversity that's here, that was here, and that is here. They do some monitoring. I hope in time that creates some guardians, some kaitiaki for this place.
Water quality is a really big issue for New Zealanders, and I think they've given the message to the government, and the government's got behind it that it's time to do something.
There's a long way to go on not just Ahuriri, but I suppose for everyone in the country to understand what Te Manawa Te Wai actually means. For me, it means about upholding the values of a place, especially in terms of waterways, in terms of the species that call these places home.
So if you look at the aims of Te Manawa Te Wai, it's to stop the degradation of fresh water, it's to start doing some actions immediately, and it's to restore the damage to fresh water in our ecosystem. And the Ahuriri project meets all of those aims. If we think of mana whakahaere, kaitiakitanga, manaakitanga and governance, it allows for Ngāi Tahu to be involved in all of those kaupapa within Te Manawa Te Wai.
So when you've got a country that's dependent on agriculture and you've got to actually find solutions that farmers can use and that we can put in place to actually solve these problems. And one of those options is constructed wetlands that can filter the runoff and remove a lot of those contaminants. We need to test and demonstrate that we can do it, to quantify what that is, how big they need to be, where they should go, what they can achieve.
This is definitely a start to us to try and right the wrongs that were done in the past.
Yeah, this work that I do and that we do is really founded on how we can address some of the impacts that we're having on the landscape and have better water quality and biodiversity outcomes.
If you can gather food somewhere, that means the water's good, the habitat's good, and therefore it's healthy, a healthy environment.
I want my moko to go out there and get a flounder out of here.
It's been really satisfying to be able to participate with local Māori and people who would consider an area like this a tūranga waiwai in an area of tapu.
I grew up on the shores of Te Waihora. I played in Te Waihora. I gathered mahinga kai from Te Waihora. So anything that contributes to Te Waihora to me is a good project.
It's been a community thing. It hasn't been Māori, it hasn't been European, it's been everybody.
In a matter of 2 years, it is just incredible the change that we're seeing in this area already.
It is very worthwhile for me, but it's more worthwhile for those that are coming after me.
We want to leave it as better than what we found it, and I think we're making a pretty good start at the moment.
We're also working with another 5 different wetlands around the country at the moment and looking at them over a 3-year period. That's really going to fill in some of the gaps in our knowledge base of really how they perform. And by quantifying that, that means that farmers can get credit for that nutrient reduction that occurs, and on the other hand, the regulators, regional councils can be confident that it's actually going to happen.
It has to be mana whenua led and done with mana whenua, not for or to mana whenua.
Because it is this exemplar, it is nationally significant and it's part of this, and I'm talking about the science part here, it's part of this national program. It's really important. But I think the most exciting part is actually the partnership with Runanga, with mana whenua, the way that it's been monitored, the mātauranga that's been used to monitor it. And I think that's just a really exciting example for future projects of how we can work together for really effective change.
This is worthwhile, not just for Kaitahu, not just for Kaitahu, Kati Māmoe and Waitaha and the people from the Pātaka, Rākai Hautu and Te Kete Ika to Te Kawa, but for all of New Zealand, because it shows that what we can do.
This is the most practical project I've ever been involved in, one that you look at, I go out there and it just gives me pride to be able to go out there and think, wow, I had a part in this.
Whilst Ahuriri is a great start, it's a blueprint for the future, but we need a whole lot more Ahuriris around the edge of the lake if we're actually going to truly make a difference.
I think we've got that vision that we know that this can work. There's tuna already in here. There's also frogs. And most recently we fished some inanga, some adult inanga that were all full of babies and eggs, so that was pretty cool to see. We want the wetlands back so we can come, yes, in time to gather food, but actually just to enjoy ourselves, to be ourselves. And I think this is a good example of, you know, working together collaboratively between the Crown, between regional authorities and iwi, as well as the community, to try to get something to happen that does give the mana back to a waterway.